My name is Rosie Grant. I am currently the Associate Principal at Prosper High School in the North Dallas area. I coached speech and debate for 16 years before moving to the dark side and joining administration. And so part of my job in the last 5 years has been helping our district to transition from the old graduation requirements into the new House Bill 5 graduation requirements. And we're a large district, so we offer all of the endorsements and helping to make sure that the school has all of the accessibility that they need to make sure that our kids can access those endorsements.
My name's Noah Recker. I'm the coach at Lavernia High School, and I guess I'm kind of being transitioned into administration partially. I only teach debate right now. That's it. That's all I have. The rest of the day I'm kind of working with AP teachers and working with administration in some of these areas, such as the House Bill 5 endorsements. And so I guess that's why I was put on this panel. I'm going to go ahead and start. So I handed out a sheet because my big thing is, yes, I only teach speech and debate. It took me a long time to get there because let's face it, for the most part, administrators, no offense, Racy, because you do understand, but for the most part, administrators do not understand our world. They do not get it whatsoever. And so you have to approach not only House Bill 5 with the graduation endorsements, but how to get some of these things implemented using their mindset, which is what I kind of put on paper for you. The first thing that I've been fighting counselors on is a lot of them don't understand that speech and debate courses are an endorsement. They just don't know where to find them. So on the bottom of that sheet, a lot of you may know already that the communications endorsement is found under the business segment. And so that's why they get lost in it. They can't find it sometimes they don't understand that it's there. And all the communications endorsement is, it plays right into what a lot of us teach already. And that's a coherent sequence of 4 communication courses. So that's debate 1, 2, or 3, oral interp 1, 2, or 3, public speaking 1, 2, or 3, and then typically an independent study in speech, which it also at our school can be co-labeled as a debate 4, but that one would be more of a local credit. The independent study in speech is an actual, that's the one that's mandated under House Bill 5. So be careful about how they might code that at the school level, because you want to make sure that the kids have the availability of that endorsement. So I know Racy comes from a 5A school, correct? I'm at a 4A school, and so it was a really tough sell to get them to go down this road. So I had to learn to speak their language in terms of why do we care about putting this endorsement or really focusing on this endorsement at the secondary level. And so on the top part of that, I've got tips to engage administrators. The first tip actually comes from the back. And the whole back side of that, a lot of you know this already, is that if a student takes debate 3, public speaking 3, or oral interp 3, that counts as an English 4 credit. So that could be both a positive and a negative for a student, because I've had students that said, no, I absolutely need to dual credit English 4. I absolutely need the AP English 4 because they want those advanced credits. But it can also be something positive for getting kids to go down the path of your endorsement because they don't necessarily want to take English 4 as a senior. They're already getting a lot of the writing components in these debate classes, which is why it's a good substitute for them. And here's how to sell it to your administrator. At least at my campus, we are always struggling with, we have this amount of teachers and I need this amount of sections. If they know that my debate courses are not going to go away because kids are signing up for it, then they might be more apt to offer this particular endorsement if they know, well, oh, if I can get rid of a section of English 4 for my senior teacher, then I can put them somewhere else where they might be needed. So, like for instance, one of my English 4 teachers, as a result of some of my kids claiming this as a credit, now has an ELA lab, and she's working with the struggling kids to pass that EOC English 2 and English 1 test. So it's all about money and the availability of teachers in this instant. Again, you have to speak their language. And so if they know that there might be a free up in terms of a section, then that could be an opportunity for them. So if I'm going back to the front of that with tips to engage administrators, another thing that I have on there is course availability. Especially, this might not be, like Gracie just said, she offers all the business endorsements, which is amazing. I come from a school where we do not offer all of the business endorsements. We are nowhere close to offering the business endorsement, all of the business endorsements, or any of the endorsement, or any of the coherent endorsements. They're not all business. So another way that you can engage administrators to go for this particular graduation endorsement is that if you have limited access to some of these pathways, if again you already have the debate courses built into your program, then you can argue or politely say to the administrators, say, hey, you know, I already teach these courses. These courses are not going anywhere because we have kids signing up. We can maybe alleviate some of the need to push every single endorsement on the pathways because we're already offering this one. And maybe we just push kids into some of the things that we already offer. I mean, this, for most of us, there are schools that do not offer debate classes, and I understand that, but we're talking graduation endorsements. For some of us, we have the debate classes. We've had the debate classes even before House Bill 5, and so this would be a simple fix. Again, speaking an administrator's language, and hey, you can alleviate some of the need for course availability. That feeds in also to cost analysis. One of the things that I went to my counselors and my administration because I heard them, you know, I sit in these meetings, they're like, it is really expensive to implement some of these endorsements. I mean, if you look at them and educate yourself, I mean, digital animation, I think is one of them, that's not cheap. Yes, they get money, like Perkins money and whatnot to cover some of those CTE courses, but in the long run, it does become a financial burden, especially for smaller schools. So once again, if you're able to push the fact that we already have an endorsement pathway that was built into our curriculum before House Bill 5, that might be another way to engage administrators. And by the way, feel free to interrupt me anytime you need to. One of the other things that I wanted to talk about, and feel free, if y'all have questions, please interrupt me, is I'm learning that, especially not just my administration at the high school level, but central office is all about numbers. And it's all about, I want it to be data driven. Every single day, I sit in cabinet meetings and it's like, well, where's the data to prove that? What's the data? What are the numbers? And so I have found myself, and I go back and I look at a lot of numbers to try and justify not only why my program should exist, but why we should push through this particular communications endorsement at the high school level. Let's face it, the legislature did not do us any favors by eliminating the speech credit. So this is a way to advocate for our jobs and to make sure that we have job security in the long run. And so one thing that I'm starting to look at and punch numbers together, and I will share out as I collect more and more of it, I put a little taste of it there. So with the new accountability system, one of the things that they look at, and I don't know how much you know about this or if you're into this, but they look at, it's 7 distinctions that you can possibly get as a campus, and it's every year, correct? 7 distinctions. So what I did was I went ahead and looked at, and granted there is some loose interpretation at times, but I went at some of the top speech schools, in UIL in this case, not TFA, but in UIL. And I said, okay, here are schools that are offering debate classes, and they've been very successful at the UIL state level. Now, I'm curious, how many distinctions did they receive as a result of those things? Just curious. They had large programs and whatnot. So I put on there, again, I took the top 5, so that's what that kind of bar graph is, meaning there were 35 distinctions possible. And it shows just, I went with 2A, 3A, 4A, and 5A. 6A, sometimes the numbers were a little harder to access. And at 1A, they were they have a lot of challenges at the 1A level. It's just their speech
They
team
can't
could be,
offer.
yes, exactly. And their speech teams oftentimes are just one kid. So, so I focus on those levels. And what you'll see on there is those schools in particular received a large number of distinctions. What I don't have on this sheet is looking at schools that do not offer these pathways receive significantly less distinctions. Like in a lot of instances, it was either one or none. So again, there's some loose causation there, but you have to start learning to speak the administrator's language, and that's one way that I was trying to persuade them. Yes, sir.
Are you talking about getting the distinctions from accomplishment through IL? Is it a direct to the distinctions, or it's just kind of a
This is just
correlation?
This is a correlation. Like I said, loose interpretation, just trying to find creative ways to maybe try and push this endorsement in schools.
Is there any
So,
direct causation?
direct? Not yet. Working on it. I'm still punching numbers.
I think
So-
the closest that you're gonna find, and I kind of cover this in my slide as well, is in the post-secondary readiness distinction. I think is where you're going to see the best correlation, attendance. If anything, we probably hurt attendance a little bit. But so there's a lot of distinctions that definitely speech and debate will not play into. Post-secondary readiness, however, I think is an easy argument that it can definitely impact that area.
Yes, Victoria.
Something that also helped me whenever I was requesting for a class
Mhm.
was the fact that the students that I had were EOC tested students. And so if you compare the kids who are in a debate class to students who are not in the debate class, they score better, they score higher, because they're making those accept speeches and writing cases. And whenever my administrator figured out that the UAL categories were informative and persuasive, they were like, oh, okay, so like you're just continuing on with this EOC, like this is so great. And I'm like, I did on purpose. Yep, yes I did.
You're speaking their language.
Yes.
And that's kind of the last step on there. Granted, distinctions is totally like, you can't link direct causation with that. But the next layer of that with test scores, now you can get into individual kids and looking at their test scores as related to some of those things. So I'm starting the process of gathering SAT scores and EOC scores with level 2 and level 3 kids that are involved directly in speech and debate. And again, there's still going to be a layer of, it's not necessarily direct causation, but that's certainly a lot better than maybe the distinction route. I'm just trying to give y'all some opportunities to engage educators to speak their language in pushing through a pathway to get this certain endorsement more accepted in public schools. It's all about educating counselors and educating administrators, because again, like I said at the very beginning, very few of them understand what we do. And so if we don't advocate for our programs or our endorsements, then more often than not, they're going to focus on the things that seem more tangible to them. So, are there any questions about anything that was covered? Yes.
You may have covered this before. The particular classes that would be part of the endorsement. Would
Yes. So on the bottom of this sheet, I don't know if you grabbed one when you came in. It's okay. There's some on that chair. It actually has the coherent sequence for the communications endorsement, and all it is just the coherent sequence of 4. So either 3 debate 1, 2, and 3, and then an independent study, or oral inter, or public speaking. So they're just taking the 4, and then the core courses are typically pretty much the same across all of these endorsements. And so it's got it kind of listed out. The one thing that I covered early on was a lot of counselors miss this one because we seem to bury this in the business section. So when you're looking at the different categories, this communications endorsement is under the business model. So it's kind of where they hide it.
I think I have a question.
Yes.
Okay, so I just want to be clear. It only applies to a communication endorsement, right? All of the courses that we offer.
Technically, the endorsement is business and industry.
Yes.
Is the name of the endorsement.
Okay,
And this is, do they consider it just a pathway?
Yes, it's a pathway.
okay. Because I have, I had a huge, I didn't have freshmen in my classes until this year because we keep our ninth graders separate. But I have this huge influx of kids that are in ninth grade that came in and said, well, I'm in this class because this is a law endorsement. And I was like, I mean, okay, I can see that. I just didn't know we offered that and that I was a part of it. I was like, I guess it makes sense. And then I have other kids who are trying to get into oral interpretation, but their counselors won't let them leave theater arts too because they want them to have a performance endorsement. And so I'm in that battle because I am in a 6A school. I've got total a little over 5,000 kids between my ninth grade center and my main campus. So, I mean, my lead counselor didn't know until the end of last year that you had to go to debate tournaments to be in the debate class.
With the particular law that you're talking about, as far as I know, that does not.
Pretty certain that's in
Makes
one of
sense.
the other endorsements.
Right.
I'm trying to think about which one it is, but I can't think of it.
But I also don't think that it's listing
I think
these
I've got it.
courses. They might be considering it law enforcement because I know that's a particular pathway
It's a pathway.
with law enforcement. But as far as I know, if we're talking about the courses that we typically teach, these are only listed in this communications pathway under the business endorsement.
Okay.
And then same for same for oral inter. Those are not necessarily included in the theater side,
Right.
although that's a whole nother debate because they probably should be.
Absolutely.
And that might be a battle that we want to fight later on. But as of now, this typically
This
is
where we
there.
can find it.
This is where you can find it.
Now, I was really good at the old system, and now I've just been completely thrown for a loop with our new system. This is on the TEA website. Where
So,
can I find it?
In my slideshow, I'm going to give you a link.
Okay.
And so if y'all want to, the Google Classroom code I put up, if you can also Google that title right there. I made this accessible to view, so if you have on your phone, just do a Google for exactly the way that's written, and you should be able to pull up the Google slide. And I've got embedded some links that will give you some of those resources.
Okay.
And if for some reason you can't find it, don't hesitate to just shoot me an email and I'll send it to you.
And I am the same way. This was pulled, we actually put all of and I'm sure this was pulled from a TA website somewhere, but we put these in the bottom of our course catalog, and so it's listed out specifically, just like this, all of the pathways. So if you need somebody to send it, what have you. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over. I think, that's kind of my perspective in trying to engage administrators. Y'all are very lucky because you have an administrator here, and so she's going to kind of offer the perspective of an administrator. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Racy.
First of all, I would plug that if you are considering what your future is going to be, consider administration. We do not have enough educators in administration that have a speech, debate, theater background. And therefore, our administrators don't understand and they don't speak our language, and therefore they make decisions blindly, not realizing the implications that it has for us. So the first thing I talked about, it is under the business and industry endorsement, and there are, I think, 5 endorsements. The larger the school, the more the ability is to offer an endorsement. Why? Because it does require multiple pathways. You've got to have a coherent sequence of courses. You've got to be able to offer all of the courses in a particular pathway. That, of course, the larger the school, the easier it is to do that. The smaller the school, they're struggling just to keep the doors open and making sure that their core classes are covered and the classes that are absolutely required for a foundation education. So just kind of know that a little bit. So the alternate options, and this is very important, the alternate options for English 4. Students can get credit for English 4 by using either Debate 3, Public Speaking 3, or Oral Interp 3. Now that being said, that is in the business and industry endorsement, okay? And here is what I was telling you. This is a link that explains what all of the different endorsements are, how they fall, some of the things that are kind of good to know. Some require physics, some don't. Some require algebra 2, some don't. That's important just to know. The more you know, the better. Our district in particular, we decided as a district that we weren't going to go with the state, and we were going to require all of our students to have algebra 2. So they don't have that option. They can stop after algebra 2, depending on what endorsement they're getting, but they do have to have algebra 2. So different districts do that differently. So as you're educating yourself, make sure you additionally know what your district has done, because sometimes you may speak out of turn to a child and advise a child wrongly. So I don't think that's a word, but whatever. All right, let me go back here. Okay, so additionally, understand your school report card. So accountability has changed. The number one thing you need to know is what administrators are being assessed on, right? Just like you guys now have T-tests, we have T-PES. And part of that is looking at our accountability system. What are we doing to meet our accountability system? The new accountability system is going to put a big flag on our campus, on our outside of our building with a grade on it. Now that's impactful, because who wants to go to a C, a D, or an F campus? Who wants their kids to go to those campuses? So this grading system has the potential to really impact a campus. And so that's one thing you need to know. You need to understand that school report card. And I gave you a link to ours just so that you can see what it looks like. But if you are really going to go in and advocate for your program, you can't just go in and know about your program. You have to understand all of the ins and outs. You have to know how the school is being assessed. You have to know what that looks like. What are the different indexes? There are 4 indexes. The first index is student achievement. That is pretty much STAR. How are you doing on STAR? Like that's kind of it. The second one is student progress. Now that one's a booger. Because you can, for instance, we instituted a double-blocked Algebra 1 2 years ago. The kids that went in there have never passed a STAR math class in their life, ever. At the end of that year, they all passed STAR, regular STAR. They, however, did not meet progress, according to the state standards. So it's one of those weird things where they have to see a certain percentage jump in their score from one test to the next for you to get progress. So that one's a hard one to get. The third one is closing the performance gaps. That is looking at all of your populations, your special education population, your socioeconomic population, as well as your racial subpopulations. All of those impact that. Now, how that plays in for you depends on your demographics. For us, our campus is 5.8% low socioeconomic. So what that means is, while we have a very low percentage, one kid has a huge impact on our numbers. So that's something else you have to understand. And then finally is post-secondary readiness. So post-secondary readiness, you would think that the larger the school, the easier that you would be able to manage this, because what you look at, you're looking at all sorts of categories. The problem is at the very last sentence on what the state gave us, it says, and other indicators decided by the commissioner. So what that means is from year to year, we don't know what he's going to decide is going to be the conditions at which we're going to determine what that index is. And those indexes help to determine our score. And I just kind of gave you that there. Understanding the report card further, there's the accountability rating, the school and student information, school financial information, dropout rates, the DLA graduates, in other words, your distinguished graduates, and then your SAT and ACT results. Now this bottom right here is where you hit your administration, okay? speech and debate kids don't drop out of school. Number one. That's just very, very rare. Secondly, they tend to be more likely to be DLA graduates. They are more likely going to hit those high levels of performance. And finally, and there's data on this, speech and debate kids tend to have higher SAT and ACT scores. So the more kids you can push into those programs in speech and debate, the higher those scores naturally are going to occur. So you've got to have those conversations. Students using alternate classes, these are just kind of points to ponder, and this is very important. One of my seniors, I found out last week, he dropped his AP English 4. He's in debate 4, he's a CXer, and he's using his debate as his English. Well, I know he wants to go to UT Austin. Well, 2 years ago, UT Austin would not take debate as the English 4 credit. So the first conversation you need to have with your kiddos before they're contemplating doing this is where they're going to go to school. And then you need to call, or they need to call that admissions office and make sure that they will take them without official English 4. Because there are some universities that when we initially went to House Bill 5 and we said, hey, we're not going to require kids to take English 4, some of the universities went, no, it's going to be a requirement. Very similarly, now in Texas, you can use computer science 1 and 2 as your foreign languages. For years, universities were saying, we're not going to accept those. Now they're starting to loosen those reins a little bit. So the more you educate yourself, the better quality conversations that you can have with your administrators, the more you're going to help.
Racy, do you know of any other universities that are like UT in that they might require English 4?
So, okay, let me piggyback on that. I was very upset with Brian. And so I went and I said, you did this without coming to talk to me? And he was like, yeah, because I knew you'd talk me out of it. I said, you're dang right. I said, UT used to not take it. And he said, I know, the counselor called for me, and they do take it now. And I said, okay. So I know initially the list was very long of the universities that would not take it, because we did a poll and I think there were like 30 major, like pretty big universities in Texas that weren't taking it. But if UT's taking it now, I highly suspect most of them are changing their tune.
The NCAA Clearing House will not accept anything other than English 4.
Here you go.
So if you have a student who is getting any sort of NCAA scholarship of any nature, they have to have English 4. They, in fact, can't have any of these other things.
Yeah.
They can't even have business English. They accept only
Yes, that was a good point.
Moral is just do your homework with
Yes.
those kids.
And that's, before you go in and you start talking, you have to know all of that background. If they're not going to be an NCAA scholarship person that's going to be in athletics or academics of some sort, then you don't really have to worry from that standpoint, but you might also have to worry about the college admissions themselves. So make sure you're having those conversations. You have to sell the benefits of why that's valid. And I've given you a link. It's an old article. It's probably from about 10, 12 years ago, called You Don't Have to Win Nationals. And it has incredible research in there about how debate students consistently have the higher test scores, how 1 year in policy debate is equivalent to writing a master's level thesis. You take that to your administration and you say, this is the reason why they should be able to supplement, then you're going to have a little bit of a better stand with them than if you just go in and say, hey, there's a lot going on. Because let's be honest, most administrators aren't going to spend the time to walk in your class and listen to your kids. If they do, that's amazing, because it won't take them once or twice and they'll understand why your kids deserve English 4 credit. The other question that has been brought up is English 4 is largely British Lit. So how does British Lit compare to debate? Well, it doesn't really. I mean, Really, it doesn't. But the essential components in English 4 are not about the British literature. It's about being able to write and interpret and analyze the literature. It just happens to be focused on British literature. Well, most of our kids are going to take British literature in college. So it's not like they're going to go through life never having a British literature class. They're going to be okay. If they never read Beowulf, I don't think their life is going to be, worse for wear. But that might be an argument that you hear. And so just be ready to come back out and say, okay, you are absolutely right. We don't study British lit. Yeah, we don't. However, the focus teaks within English 4 have to do with what they're doing with the literature, not the literature itself.
Have them perform Beowulf in oral interpretation.
Yes, exactly. So the other change that happened, Noah referenced it, is that speech is not required. The way the wording looks is that you have to have demonstrated proficiency. And every district determines what that's going to be. Now there are requirements that they list, but they determine where we are putting that waiver. At our school, we put it in social studies. But that's another way that you can go in and say to your administration and say, hey, I think it's great that we've made a commitment that we're going to demonstrate proficiency in speech communication education through whatever field. I'd like to be able to work with them to make sure that they have a proper structure so that when these kids go to college, they're being able to function in that college setting for their college speech class. Very few administrators are going to go, no, we don't want you to cross-curricular help. Right? That's what we tell people all the time is work cross-curricularly. That's the same thing with our focus in our district is writing across the curriculum, balanced literacy. And so what we're working on right now is making sure that all of our departments are writing the same way so that they're supporting English and instead the kids aren't going, well, in this class I write this way, and in this class I write this way, and in this class I write this way, and then they get to the STAR or the ACT or the SAT or whatever, and they don't know how to write because they've written so many different ways. So that's a way that another conversation that you can have that focuses on the graduation requirements. And then make sure, this is one I think should be common sense, but make sure that your administration knows that ProfComm is CTE funding. And there are districts that don't know that. And so if you offer professional communications, then they can push kids in there and get additional funding. There are so many districts that are putting speech, what's the old one? CommApps. They're putting CommApps at the 8th grade and then going, oh, well, they have their speech credit. Okay, well, you just gave them their speech credit with no additional funding. Whereas if you change that and you let us do it, then you're going to get an additional 35 cents a kid per day or whatever it is.
I have questions on that.
Sure.
So on my campus, we have, I think, 8 sections of CommApp. We don't have ProfComm.
That's sad.
Really?
Yeah, and my district still requires the credit. My district does.
Yes.
But we don't have ProfComm. We have CommApp.
So you get to be the savior.
Yes.
I'm telling you, your administration is going to hail you. You walk in and you say, hey, how would it sound if I could make you 35 cents per kid per day by changing a PIMS code?
Yes.
Does that sound good?
So we just stop offering CommApp and start offering ProfComm.
The teaks are so similar. I think there's
Okay.
1 or 2
Because
differences.
it's heavy technology.
Right.
It's heavier technology. Are you doing it? Is it a semester course or a full year course?
Semester.
Okay, so here's what I would do. Tell them to change it at semester.
Okay,
So they would then go from no funding in the fall
right.
to CTE funding in the spring. You then have just made your district thousands upon thousands of dollars. So when you need Chromebooks
Which I
for
didn't
your
know.
kids,
Especially
get-
for your district. I mean,
Yeah, and my principal was actually really open I just met with her last week and she was like, I'm gonna really try to get you guys 10 laptops because I know you need technology. And I was like, yes.
So here's the trick though. If you get PIMS coded under CTE, you're now in the CTE department. Where's all the funding? CTE.
Well, that is my next question, okay? My district has us just, and I'm sure you guys have the same experience all over the place. Like, we're trying to get new textbooks because our textbooks haven't been updated in probably 20 years. That's not an exaggeration. And so at the district level, we're considered fine arts or performing arts because we separate fine arts and performing arts. So they call us performing arts, but then when they look to see where the money for our books comes from, they say it comes from ELA because all of our teachers are ELA. Okay, well, who's going to pay for the books? And so my question is really linked to that. What does the state say as far as funding when you look at these classes?
The state doesn't. The state looks at funding one way. Okay, if you're in these classes, you get a certain funding. It doesn't matter what department it's in, it's just a certain amount of funding. If you're in CTE classes, you get additional funding. So if your PIMS code falls under the CTE umbrella, then you get additional funding. Now, in a lot of districts, that means that they put you in the CTE department. Now, you tend to be the lone wolf, but CTE is full of lone wolves because that's kind of the inherent nature of CTE. You can't have 30 different teachers that teach law enforcement unless you're a large school.
Right.
And so it's not like that's unusual, whereas in English, there's all of the English 1 teachers, all of the English 2, and then speech.
Yeah.
Like, where do I go?
Yeah.
You know, and so at least this way you're falling into a group that's a little bit more like you in that you're an elective and not a core area, and then you're getting funding.
Okay, and then just one more. So if ProfCom falls under CTE, does debate, oral, interpretive, public speaking?
No.
But it's a business endorsement?
Because
But not career in technology.
Because ProfCom, correct me if I'm wrong, Racy, but ProfCom falls as an option under several of the other pathways,
Yes.
but not here.
Yes.
So there is no CTE funding here for this pathway, but there is for ProfCom because it falls under some of those CTE pathways.
Yeah, because the curriculum requires the implementation of technology, whereas ComApps and debate, I mean, technically we use technology, but for those of us that have been around a while, you know, that lugged 30 tubs to Las Vegas or wherever, or Massachusetts, you don't have to have technology.
Right.
It's not required in the TEKS, but it is required in the ProfCom TEKS.
I just want to add, I'm primarily a CTE teacher, and all the CTE courses got state adopted books this year. So I just got my ProfCom books in this week, and so you can get new books, you know, because they're all been state adopted now.
Do I just take that to my district administrator, or
Go.
do I need to start on my campus?
You need to go always start with your campus.
Yes,
Always start with your campus. You just go to your principal and say, hey, I went to this conference and I found out that I can make the just one PIMS code is going to be able to make the district thousands of dollars if we change it at Christmas. And he's going to be like, or she, what?
And not only
Say
that,
again?
but you're also giving those kids more of an option for possible endorsements, since it does fall as an option for a lot of those pathways.
It does.
So you're being a savior in 2 ways.
Yes.
So you really do need to bring that to them.
Yes. And then invite your admin. Our debate coach did this, and many of you may do it. He went into the board meeting again. He emailed the superintendent and said, I'd like 2 minutes at the board meeting to invite the board as special guests for our tournament, to judge at our tournament. And so, of course, Dr. Watkins said yes. And so he went to the board meeting and he said he gave them all the information, told them when his judging sessions were, where he taught them if they could come, though it wasn't required, and invited them to come to participate as special judges, of course, in HID. I mean, you know, we're not going to put them in a policy round. But what it does is that gets those people that makes the financial decisions it gets them involved in your activity. And it puts a little bit of pressure, but in a good kind of way, that you're saying, hey, we would love to have you as special honored guest judges. And so that's kind of neat. But the main impact of all of this is you've got to know the endorsements, you've got to know what the report card is, you've got to know that information so that when you're asked about things, you can speak educatedly and you can go in and advocate for your program and how it's going to impact positively the district and how that will impact that grade that's going to go on your school. What questions, Gil?
Yeah, other questions?
So, I already have debate 1, 2, and 3. Could I go to my principal and say, hey, we're already offering almost all of these courses, so let's take advantage and make it a pathway?
Yes. What size school are you?
Huh?
What size school?
It's 5A.
Okay. So y'all probably offer the business and industry. Business and industry is one of the biggest endorsements.
Right.
And so you probably offer that endorsement. The flexibility lies in, because they can already do it that way, but the flexibility lies in that English 4 substitution. Because inherently they can make it a pathway. The problem is your counselors don't always know that, and so they don't understand that that can be a business and industry endorsement because of that pathway. So it's more about educating your counselors that, hey, I just want to let you know we have an additional pathway through the business and industry, through communications. Here's what it says, and if you look on that, I've shown you one of the links that I gave you tells you exactly how it falls. And so you can just take that and say, see, here's how it falls. And so we can use this as a pathway. But in addition to that, to help lessen those numbers in English 4, and this goes back to what Noah was saying, we have too many kids in English 4, we can't staff it. We really want smaller classes in English 1 and English 2 where we're STAR tested. Hey, so if my debaters are not having to take English 4, then that's going to lessen that load a little bit.
But if you lose that battle on English 4, you can still, it still makes sense to do
Yes.
this, right?
Yes,
Yes.
absolutely.
You can still do it
Because
even if you
it'll be independent speech is the 4th year.
Yes.
Yes. Well, and I'm pretty certain, I'm not 100% certain, but I'm pretty certain that there is an innovative course for Debate 4. I think I saw it when I was going through the code books the other day. But you can ask your registrar and just say, can you look and see if there's an innovative course code for Debate 4? And I think there is. And if there's an innovative course code already, then you can use that. It's when there's not one already in existence, then you don't get credit for it unless it's a TEKS
Right.
class.
Because a lot of them will try and code it as a local credit, and
Yes.
then you kind of
So
lose that
independent study
pathway.
will not count.
It
Independent
will.
study does. It's a TEKS class. But that's the thing that you have to remember. Your courses, if they do not have TEKS assigned to them or they're not innovative courses, you get a local credit, you get no state funding. So you're going to lose that battle every day of the week, right? And so you've got to find something where you can get at least the regular state credit, which is either a TEKS aligned class, independent study is, or an innovative credit class.
Yeah, so what I had to do, so at my school, I'm a 5A school as well, but we didn't have freshmen couldn't take debate 1, and yet we started sophomore level, and so they wouldn't do a freshman unless I can get a 4, but there wasn't debate 4, but they said you got to find, so I found that independent study through TEKS in speech, and then so we offered debate 1 now for freshmen. And then, but what we do is we do a prerequisite. You must have debate 3 before you go into independent study speech.
Yes, and that is very important because if not, you have people finagling you all over everywhere and messing you up.
Other questions?
So, last year I was able to move out of the English department and just do speech and debate. This last year, my numbers dropped a little bit. And of course, my administration was like, I mean, boost those up if you want to keep the schedule you've got. And I'm like, I haven't done my I would like your opinion about our middle school is like across the street from us, like literally across the street from us. And they already require for the theater teacher to teach a theater 1 class over at the middle school. So in order for me to not teach English and maybe recruit a little bit more at the middle school level, would it be a good idea for me to approach my administration? Should I drop the numbers again? I would be willing to teach a grade 1 course at the middle school.
I am always a proponent of starting your recruiting at the middle school.
Yeah.
So
I already go in the English class and we do like a whole demonstration.
Yes.
Presentation, and so I get most of my numbers through that. But
here's the thing with all of those though, when you're dealing with middle school, very rarely are you gonna sell debate because it is work, right? You don't sell it as much with the kids as you do with the parents. And you talk about the scholarship opportunities. You talk about the fact that debate students typically have higher STAR scores, higher ACT and SAT scores. You pull that research and you push that research. That research is going to convince those parents are going to push those kids. And so, especially this kind of stereotypical, but especially your GT kids, because in the state of Texas, we don't typically do a very good job of meeting the needs of our GT kids. And, we're worried about the special education kids, but the GT kids are just kind of like, well, you get high school, you got AP classes, good for you, and so if you can really say, hey, look, we can bridge the gap and we can really provide that creative outlet for those GT kids that they're going to leave now those grade school classes, and they're just suddenly going to go into AP classes. Debate can bridge that gap for you and give them that creative outlet. So that's another conversation that you can have with your administration, is how debate not satisfies, but what's the word I'm looking for? Fulfills the needs of the GT kids. And then you might even be able to finagle some GT funding out of it every once in a while.
Well, also, we go to the CT department goes in and promotes our classes to the 8th graders every spring before they register. But another thing you might want to add is talk about what kind of jobs that they want to get into, like if you want to be a lawyer, if you want to be going to politics or something. Those would be, debate you want to probably be focusing on that or stuff like that. So find a career that they're interested in doing, and then that hooks them into the course as well.
Another option, especially for this pathway, is so many of our districts have course fairs that we send a bulk of our students to, and even the new 8th graders that are going to be coming up. I think it's important because at our course fair, they all funnel into the auditorium first, and they're given a big presentation about endorsements and pathways. So if you're strategic, again, that's just our district, but if you're strategic about knowing that they are going to have this information presented to them, and then you have, hey, here's an option for you, and it's an option with you doing something that you might enjoy as an extracurricular activity even, and they're tying it to something that they might enjoy, it doesn't become a burden to them. It becomes I can kind of, kill 2 birds with 1 stone in that instance. So if you're able to sell that pathway endorsement early on, that becomes effective for recruiting kids into your classes as well.
Any other questions? All right, well, thank y'all. Again, that's our email addresses. If you need anything, please let us know. And
I don't know if I'll speak for her, but also if you need us to advocate for you in
Yes.
any way, we are more than happy to do that.
yeah, and if you don't, somebody else called me the other day and said, hey, do you mind if I use your name and say that they can call you as an administrator and you can talk to them about speech? Sure, absolutely. Yeah, that's not a problem. Because sometimes some administrators have a tendency to not want to listen.
Believe that we know it
Yes.
is
Yeah.
not our profession.
Exactly.
And so, yeah, don't hesitate to use my name. as long as it's
I don't have the
nice.
weight, but you can use mine too.
And
Sounds
Noah-
better coming from an administrator. So.
Well, but Noah's bridging that gap now, and so, yeah.